So when we wear these clothes dating from ancient traditions, we are aligning ourselves to the shared traditions of Oxford and Islam. Whilst the world changes around us, Oxford remains the same, holding fast to our shared values of truth, creativity, and freedom of thought. Just as Subfask does not change, we believe that Oxford and Islam remain unchanging at the center of positive change. Accordingly, we continue to strive to be that positive change. In Hillary term alone, we hosted one of our speakers tonight, Tariq Ramadan, in Oxford's most famous debating chamber, the Oxford Union, to talk about jihad. We also hosted a seminar in polygamy in the home of the world's most prestigious scholarship, Rhodes House, and a workshop on Islamic art in Britain's first museum, the Ashmolean. Is it not then appropriate that today we are holding Rethinking Islamic Reform, the most pressing issue in Islam, here in the Sheldonian Theatre, the most prestigious venue in Oxford? This level of excellence which we strive for is down to the hard work and vision of our members. I would then like to take this opportunity to thank my team for all that they have done for this event and for making all of this possible. I once again welcome you to Oxford, and I hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Aminul. Tonight's speakers are more remarkable than my short introduction of their achievements could possibly convey. But obviously, I'm going to give it a go. Hamza Yusuf Hanson is one of the leading Islamic thinkers and speakers in the Western world today. After converting to Islam at the age of 17, Hamza Yusuf studied with some of the most notable scholars in the Arab world for over a decade, receiving a number of teaching licenses in classical Islamic subjects. Following this, he returned to the US to earn degrees in healthcare and religious studies. His years of meticulous traditional study, intellectual rigor, and eloquence have placed him at the very forefront of Islamic intellectual discourse. In 1996, Sheikh Hamza co-founded the Zaytuna Institute in California, which has established an international reputation for reviving the study of classical Islamic studies in the West, and has since become America's first ever accredited Muslim college. As one of the most recognized and respected voices, Sheikh Hamza regularly delivers lectures at venues drawing tens and thousands of supporters. He has advised both the White House and the Arab League, and most recently was a guest speaker at Tony Blair's Faith Foundation. We're deeply honored to welcome Sheikh Hamza to the stage. Professor Ramadan is one of the world's foremost and renowned intellectuals in Islamic academia. Born in Geneva, he has a PhD in Arabic and Islamic studies and received intensive training in classical Islamic scholarship at Al-Azhar University, Cairo. A senior research fellow at St. Anthony's College, he was appointed chair of contemporary Islamic studies at Oxford University in 2009. In addition to serving as president of the Brussels-based European Muslim Network, Professor Ramadan works as an expert in various commissions linked to the Brussels Parliament. He's also a member of several working parties throughout the world. Dubbed a Muslim Martin Luther, he has repeatedly been named as one of the most important contemporary intellectuals of our time, including by the British Prospect and American Foreign Policy magazines. Time magazine also recognized him as amongst the 100 most important innovators of the 21st century. He has advised numerous Western governments, including the American administration, the British government, and recently the French government, and has written more than 20 books. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage. Tonight's event will be chaired by head organizer and former ISOC president himself, Imad Ahmed. I'll hand over to him now to present tonight's topic. Welcome, Imad.
Thank you, Miriam. Actually, Miriam is one of our stars in the Islamic Society. She is our media representative and regularly represents us on many pertinent issues to a variety of media outlets. Most recently, she was on the BBC, she was in the Times, in the Guardian, all incidentally we have represented here in our audience here today. Thank you to Aminul as well. As we can tell from Aminul's speech, he's a person who brings ideas together beautifully. And it is through his vision his character, energy, and leadership that such a project could come into fruition. So thank you, Aminul. Now, moving on to the event itself, it's strange to think that this just started as an idea amongst some friends, and now it's turned into something of this magnitude. Our distinguished audience on the floor, with representation from the government, policymakers, think tanks, scholars, and community leaders, is a testament to how important the question of Islamic reform has become. Yet the notion of reform itself, despite being one of the most oft-repeated, remains ill-defined. The title of our conference itself is a victim of the ambiguity that surrounds this discourse. Indeed, in a conversation that we had with Sheikh Hamza a few days ago, he began to unpack the title, Rethinking Islamic Reform. Well, what do we mean by reform? Do we mean theological reform, political reform, structural reform? And what is inherently Islamic about the reform that might take place or should take place? And to use the word rethinking, when we say rethinking, are we implying that reform has been sufficiently thought about such that we need to think about it again? In spite of the lack of clarity as to our definitions, this catch-all term of reform has spurred many projects with diverging aims and contradictory trajectories, often with institutional support and indeed governmental support. Some have considered the efforts of many reform projects to be wholly counterproductive, if not inattentive and offensive to the Muslim community. Most recently, a House of Commons committee highlighted the sensitivity of the issue, reporting that much of the effort towards reform had been stigmatizing and potentially alienating to the Muslim community that these projects were claiming to serve. In fact, we are pleased to have Dr. Phyllis Starkey, who headed the publication of this government report, here today in our audience. Now, I know you don't want to see me here speaking for much longer, so I'm about to go, but just before I go, please allow me to outline the questions which this conference aims to answer. They broadly fall into 4 strands, so I'll go through them in turn. Firstly, what is Islamic reform? What is legitimate Islamic reform? And where are its spheres and its remits? Secondly, why have Islamic reform projects thus far been met with distrust and trepidation from the Muslim grassroots? We would like this answered with a special reference to contemporary reform initiatives. Thirdly, what is the interaction between Islam and the political, social, religious and cultural discourses surrounding it, if any? In other words, is the call to Islamic reform being affected from the outside, or is it an impulse that comes from within?
Activity has metaphysical impact, that what we do in the world is actually reflected back to us through the world. So natural disasters are not seen as simply events that happen because of tectonic plate shifts, but there's actually a relationship between human behavior and between what is happening in the world. For many, many Western peoples now, that idea is a quaint, superstitious, historical idea from a previous time, something very difficult for Western people to actually relate to. One of the problems with that idea, however, and I do put this caveat, is that many Muslims will use that as a way of pointing the finger at people and saying, this is why it's happening. You're an evil person and therefore God is zapping you. That is also a major problem because there's nothing in the Islamic tradition that permits one to do that, because it is arrogating to oneself the judgment of God, and that's simply not in the realm of a human being to do. And so that's a very important point. Another aspect that is very difficult for, I think, Western peoples to relate to is the fact that the primary texts of Islam are 1,400 years old. And it is very difficult for Western people to understand how you can use a text that was written 1,400 years ago to have anything to do with modern legislation. This seems really quite incomprehensible for many people. And To give you an example, in the United States, we have a 200-year-old document. It's actually older than 200 years, but we have a document that is a little older than 200 years called the Constitution. It's the basis of our legal system. In the arguments that we have in the United States of America, we have arguments around what they call strict construction and loose construction, how we interpret the Constitution, originalism versus a living Constitution, the idea of what's called textualism in our tradition, intentionalism. What's the intent of the framers when they said these things? And should we base it on their intent, even though they were speaking 200 years ago in a very different context? Or is it a living constitution that can be reinterpreted based on the changes of time? The Founding Fathers didn't really leave a lot of explanation of how they wanted it to be understood, although there are some remarks. Thomas Jefferson said that you can't expect an adult to wear the coat of a child. And countries grow, and therefore our understanding will grow, and there needs to be changes. But he also said, but don't allow the Constitution to be wax in the hands of the government to where they can shape it to fit the way they want. This dilemma that exists in the United States is very similar to the dilemma that Muslims are going through today. There are many Muslims that are arguing for a living Quran, as opposed to a type of textualist approach or intentionalist approach to the Quran. How do we interpret the Quran in the light of modern society? Now, the reason that I really wanted to drive that point home is because the problems of law and language are perennial problems. We still study Plato because Plato raises questions that are still pertinent to people living today. We still study Aristotle because Aristotle also addresses issues that are pertinent to people today. And so, in light of looking at the past to illuminate the present, I would like to honor a Japanese response to the post-World War situation where the Japanese now have better rock and roll than the Americans. They can imitate Elvis Presley. Even their prime minister, when he came to America, he wanted to go to Graceland. That was the first place that he asked George Bush to go to, and he actually did go and visit because he apparently is a great fan of Elvis. They have some of the finest classical musicians. This is very common for conquered peoples to imitate those who have conquered them. This is why Native Americans are often the last people wearing cowboy clothes.
This level of excellence which we strive for is down to the hard work and vision of our members. I would then like to take this opportunity to thank my team for all that they have done for this event and for making all of this possible. I once again welcome you to Oxford, and I hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Aminul. Tonight's speakers are more remarkable than my short introduction of their achievements could possibly convey. But obviously, I'm going to give it a go. Hamza Yusuf Hanson is one of the leading Islamic thinkers and speakers in the Western world today. After converting to Islam at the age of 17, Hamza Yusuf studied with some of the most notable scholars in the Arab world for over a decade, receiving a number of teaching licenses in classical Islamic subjects. Following this, he returned to the US to earn degrees in healthcare and religious studies. His years of meticulous traditional study, intellectual rigor, and eloquence have placed him at the very forefront of Islamic intellectual discourse. In 1996, Sheikh Hamza co-founded the Zaytuna Institute in California, which has established an international reputation for reviving the study of classical Islamic studies in the West, and has since become America's first ever accredited Muslim college. As one of the most recognized and respected voices, Sheikh Hamza regularly delivers lectures at venues drawing tens and thousands of supporters. He has advised both the White House and the Arab League, and most recently was a guest speaker at Tony Blair's Faith Foundation. We're deeply honored to welcome Sheikh Hamza to the stage. Professor Ramadan is one of the world's foremost and renowned intellectuals in Islamic academia. Born in Geneva, he has a PhD in Arabic and Islamic studies and received intensive training in classical Islamic scholarship at Al-Azhar University, Cairo. A senior research fellow at St. Anthony's College, he was appointed